to start webinar. Oh, that was fast.
Do I need to go off camera?
Um,
Then are we posted on? All right.
good morning, and welcome to the Think and Grow Rich Live Saturday show. This is a master class today, folks, and we're talking about subconscious. My name is Dr. Peter A. James, and welcome to another Saturday morning edition of Think and Grow Rich Live. And if you've never participated, if you've never joined our show, this is the place where we dive into Napoleon Hill's infamous text, Think and Grow Rich, and talk about the different chapters, the different principles, 13 principles, for those of you who are very familiar and you know them very, very well. But in these Saturday morning sessions, we dive on into each chapter subsequently, almost according to the months of the year. This month, of course, we're into the subconscious mind, and we have a phenomenal conversation today. And I'm not alone, but we don't have our usual angels here today. We just have two angels, myself and the leadership strategist, Galen Bing. Galen, good morning to you. How are you doing today, sir?
Fantastic. If I can get my camera. There we go. Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this conversation. We are going to be talking about the subconscious mind, and just to give a little peek under the tent of the conversation we had right before we went live here. I was thinking, man, we talk about this, all the time. We talk about this chapter several times a year. What else can we talk about relative to the subconscious mind? And literally right before we went live, we got into this area of the chapter that just really took on new life. So I am very hopeful, and I expect that the same will be happening for each of our listeners, for each of our fellow readers, that every time you read this book, something else becomes more apparent, something else becomes more significant, something else becomes more relevant. And it's one of the few books that I don't know that I can ever get enough of reading it because of that. I'm constantly changing. What's important to me is constantly changing, and this book seems to be addressing where I am, and this idea and this principle of the subconscious mind is no different. So can't wait to get into this conversation.
Yeah, let's start right there, Galen. In the text, Napoleon Hill says the subconscious acts first on the dominating desires, which have been mixed with emotional feelings such as faith. So we start, before we started the show, we were starting to talk about faith. But I want to take you on a little story first, back to when you were as a kid, right? And when I say a kid, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And when we were that age, we used to dream, daydream, nighttime dream, imagine. We had our imagination was on full tilt. And to a certain extent, our imagination and the real world were very connected. We almost believed that anything that we thought up can come to fruition. But something happened as we continue to grow. We got into our late single digits, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we got into the teenage years. We started to get infiltrated with a lot of education. You had to follow straight lines. Parents were keeping you safe. We were inundated. And what happens to that imagination, to that dreaming, to that connection? It begins to fizzle. And now we begin to operate, as we have heard, in the real world. And truth be told, as I sit here and talk about this short evolution or progression, we begin to lose the can do anything and and put sincere limits around ourselves. And I don't think we ever turn back. But today we're hoping that we can start doing that right away, right, Galen?
Yeah, I mean, just think about how much fun
Yeah.
that period in your life was. And to your point, it wasn't until we got educated
Right.
when we start learning all the reasons why we couldn't do the things that we were already doing, right? We were already doing these things, but we were learning all the reasons why we couldn't do those things. And we were getting instructed by people who were supposed to be smarter than we are,
Yes.
and they were telling us why we can't be the president of the United States and a baseball player and a jazz musician, and go to the moon, right? They were explaining to us why we couldn't do those things. And even if you go back to, and we were talking about the connections between scripture and this book, and even if we go back to scripture, Christ was saying that we should have the faith of a kid. He basically said, "You look, we need to go back to that as opposed to this more adult, refined, respected, educated level of being." So yeah, this is gonna be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive on in a little bit deeper because we haven't even scratched the faith conversation just yet. We're going to dive on into that and ask ourselves, hey, what happens to our faith? What happens to your faith who are watching? Why don't you have all-encompassing faith? Why not? And I sometimes challenge my students who I teach that when we have the worry and anxiety in our lives, what do we have worry and anxiety around? What is it really about at the end of the day? And I believe it's really about nothing at the end of the day. We begin to worry about what others will think or what others will say more than anything else. But we'll go deeper. I'm starting to get ahead of myself. Galen, I want to bring it back to you. We have this phenomenal video that we show every single week that kind of gives us a little breakdown of these principles, these chapters that we look at on a regular basis. Do you mind teeing that up for us a little bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. I love this video as well because although we talk about one principle at a time, this is a great reminder as to how everything connects. And it's a reminder how, although today's conversation is about the subconscious mind, we're talking about faith. We're talking about what's your desire. We're talking about auto suggestion. Everything does connect together. And this video is a great reminder. So take a listen and take a watch of this video, and just think about that. Think about how do you incorporate all of these principles to work together.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Autosuggestion step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the Wild Wild West days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Those are the 13 principles, the 13 chapters overall. Excited to dive on into this conversation on subconscious mind and how to impact ours a little bit. I started out already talking about a story about us and our upbringing as children and the faith that we had. And as I sit there and even reflect on it a little bit more, the imagination that we had, the dreams that we also had complete faith in our parents or whoever was our caregiver. we didn't really think about where is our next meal coming from. We didn't worry about if we had any money. We had 100% faith. And if I could read some definitions of this word there, faith, Galen, let me give a couple of non-biblical and biblical. Faith, just by the dictionary, says that it is a complete trust, complete being the key word here, complete trust or confidence in someone or something. You know, biblically, faith is considered a belief or trust in God based on evidence, but without total proof. Right. And then lastly, Napoleon Hill speaks about in the text that, and actually this is the very last verse, the very last chapter of chapter 11, Subconscious Mind. Napoleon Hill says, faith is the only known agency which will give your thoughts a spiritual nature in this way. Faith and fear make poor bedfellows. Where one is found, the other cannot exist. Galen, before we get on the call, you were telling a story about walking on the water.
Yeah, you're gonna get me in trouble here. You're gonna get me in trouble with this one, but I'm going in. I got faith that you got me.
Got you, man.
I've gotten really enamored by this this mini series show, I believe on Netflix, called The Chosen, and it talks about the life of Jesus Christ as told from the perspective and from the vantage point of the disciples. And the episode that I was watching last night was when Jesus was walking on the water, and Peter saw him and said, hey, look, if you bid me to walk on the water, then I know that you're going to take care of everything, and I'm going to come out there too. So I have said, and I don't know that this is true, but I believe, because the Bible says that Jesus was fully man and fully God, and he also said that everything that he's done, I can do too. That means that the biggest difference between the man part of Jesus and the man part of Galen is that Jesus really believed that he could do all the things that he was doing. And there are some things Jesus did I just don't believe that I can do. And I think therein lies the difference. Jesus was able to walk on the water because he believed that he could.
Yeah.
And Peter said, hey, look, if you take care of the water, I believe I can walk on it too. So basically, I believe that you can take care of this for me. And that was the source of Peter's faith. And once Peter got out there and was walking on the water, then he got distracted and he started looking at other things. He took his eyes off of the source of his faith, and that's when he fell into the water. And there are certain points in the Bible where Jesus, like, I see his attitude, his personality comes out. He goes, ye of little faith, right? If you just kept your faith where it was supposed to be, you were doing this. And it reminds me of the journey into parenthood, where my daughter could do all kinds of amazing things. She had so much talent, so many abilities that she didn't really even believe that she could do, but I knew that she could do it. And I had faith in her beyond her faith in herself. Going back to what we said earlier, what would it take for us to have faith in our own abilities, so that we do things that we know that we're able, that everyone else seems to know that we're able to do, but we're reluctant to even try because of this lack of faith? That is what we talked about beforehand. That is the challenge that I offer to everyone. What's something that you're reluctant to do, and because of that reluctance, you're not successful? Even the Bible talks, I mean, not the Bible, but the book Think and Grow Rich talks about, if you pray for a thing but you have fear as you pray that you may not receive it, or that your prayer may not be acted upon by the infinite intelligence, your prayer will have been in vain.
Yeah.
So there has to be this confidence, this expectation,
Faith.
that that things are going to happen before they will actually happen.
And what I love about that, Galen, what you made me think of is, and I put this question on YouTube, where do we lose that childlike faith? How did that happen over time? And I want to say good morning, of course, to Colette, Miss Smitty. Good to see you this morning. When Wyman, see you. And McNeil is on the other side. Also, we don't have our distinguished angel here this morning, Galen. She left us the keys, so we are diving on into this conversation. But let's go on back to
and of course, Donnelly is in the audience.
Donnelly's
Donnelly is in the
always here.
studio.
Yes. How could I forget? Donnelly, you got to give us a hard question, man. You got to give us something, as you always do, for sure. Good to have you with us, for sure. Where did we lose this faith? Galen, you mentioned it earlier, education, parents, but I wonder what happened for us to lose this faith that affects our subconscious in that way. So just even think about that story. What about, where did this come from? Was it our teachers? Was it our parents? Was it the media? Was it each other? Where do you think we lost it there, Galen? That faith, that childlike faith.
Yeah, my answer, my perspective is yes. Everything that you just said, yes, that's where we, much like, and I keep going back to the story of Peter walking on the water. Much like in that story, we start looking at our surroundings, and we start becoming convinced that this is reality.
Yeah.
I when I read this text and when I read the other text, it's basically saying that this is not reality. We're living a spiritual life, but we're having a physical expression of that spiritual life. But we are still spirits. And the more that we can connect with the spirit, the more that we can believe that we can do these things that we say that we really, really want to do, the more we act in a way that demonstrates that belief. I just had a conference in Texas yesterday, 2-day conference that ended yesterday. And I talked about the book written by Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made. And one of the things that I often reference from her work is that she says that we often believe that we have an emotion, and from that emotion, we have a physical experience. And what she says is the opposite is actually true. We have a physical expression, we have a physical experience. And because of that physical experience, we try to label it, and we label it with an emotion. And the research that always captivates me is she says the physical experience that you have when you are afraid is the exact same physical experience that you have when you are excited. Your heartbeat increases, your body temperature increases, your eyes get a little bigger, same physical experience. But the difference between fear and excitement is the story that we tell ourselves about what's on the other side of this activity. And based upon that story, we're going to show up a different way. So let's go back to Peter on the water. The water was rough. It just was. And Peter told himself, oh my gosh, this water is going to consume me and I'm going to drown. That's what he told himself. Therefore, fear came in, and therefore he started to physically express that fear. And I think that we do the exact same things in our lives. We have a physical experience, and we label it something dangerous. We label it something for us to be concerned about, and therefore we start behaving that way, and that's what impacts our experience.
What's interesting about what you just said there too, it made me think about, if I'm not mistaken, Peter was a fisherman, right? Who could swim, I'm pretty sure, or at least even in rougher waters could probably survive for a little while until someone rescued him. And yet he still lost faith because of what was going on around him. And again, I have to go back to, as we mature in our lives, where do we lose that, right? But then how do we get it back, Galen? I think that's going to be the crux of our conversation today. What are the things that we're doing to get back that mustard seed faith, or that affects our subconscious in ways that there's no doubt I'm going to be successful. Whatever I touch is going to turn to gold. Tomorrow is going to be even better than today. That type of faith that affects our subconscious, that we operate like that day in, day out, in spite of what we're inundated with on the news, in spite of the news that we may hear from loved ones, deaths, sadness, pandemics, wars. How do we still have that rock solid faith that affects a rock solid subconscious? That's probably the $1 million question for you there, Galen.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a $1 million question, but it definitely the answers will generate at least $1 million. And I'm going to try to channel Ann McNeil, who I know is watching. I think it goes back to getting very, very clear on your desire. What is it that you really, really want? And again, I'm mesmerized by this show, The Chosen, because I think the actors are doing a really, really good job of conveying what it would be like to experience these stories that we know, but they're experiencing it for the first time, right? And they're doing a great job of conveying that to me. And one of the things that I am mesmerized by is just how much clarity the actor who is playing Jesus seems to be portraying. He was very, very clear on what his desire was. He was very, very clear on who he is and when he was supposed to step into who he is. I wonder if we have clarity as to why we're here on this planet, or do we have clarity around what we're here to do? Do we have clarity around even our businesses, what our businesses are supposed to be? Do we have that kind of clarity? Because if we don't, then yeah, we're going to get tossed around by the waves of life, right? We're going to get distracted by, the economy. We're going to get distracted by, this is happening in this part of the world, because we don't have clarity around what we are here to do. Because my job, my purpose does not change because of wars happening on the other side of the world. Wars are happening. I still have a mission to complete.
So you made me think about actors and actresses, and the very best of those actors and actresses, well, oftentimes you'll hear stories of how they got into character, how they get into character, and sometimes even in between takes, they stay in character. So what I'm envisioning now is when they step onto that set, into their trailer or whatever the case may be, they begin that transformation. I've also thought that the very best actors, if they don't have a strong will and a strong subconscious, that portraying all these different actors over their career can really affect them in a way that they may need to seek support and assistance from professionals. However, just think about your very favorite actors or actresses, and what it would take to play some of those roles that they play so well. What will it look like for them to have to step into that character, as Galen had mentioned, the Jesus character in the Chosen? And who are you going to have to embody? What are you going to have to think? Obviously, you're memorizing your lines, but that's only the beginning, right? How are you putting on the outfit of this character and staying in there with that belief? I'm wondering if there's an analogy or a tie-in to who we need to be in order to really affect our faith and thus our subconscious. What are your thoughts on that, Galen?
Yeah, I love that. I love where you're going with this because we're drawing towards the end of 2023, and I'm starting
Mhm.
to think about 2024 and starting to set my goals for what I'd like to accomplish, and I'm setting a goal that I want to earn $1 million in my business, and that is coming specifically from the text because the text basically says everyone should want to earn $1 million, not necessarily for the money, but for who you would have to become in
Mhm.
order to have a business that generates $1 million. You have to become something different, right? Because if I were the person, if I were already the person who had $1 million business, then I would have $1 million. But there has to be a change in me, and I think that it's just as easy as you just described. We have to get clarity of what our objective is, our desire, and have the desire for that. Then we have to leverage auto suggestion.
Mhm. Mhm.
We've got to have deep knowledge of our content, right? And then we've got to continuously remind ourselves that this is not real.
Mm.
What we're seeing is not real.
That's huge right there. That's huge right there, Galen.
Yeah,
Because
it's it.
we hold on to the things that we can touch.
Yeah.
Go, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go
No,
ahead.
no, 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 no. So the outside reality is not real. What's
Mhm.
real is what's in here. I'm going to manifest what I want. I'm going to manifest what's inside of my head. And we've got to, much like Peter,
Yeah.
we've got to be willing to lock into that and even be called crazy at times. We've
Mm.
got to be willing to be called crazy at times because you're suggesting that Peter, you're suggesting you're going to have $1 billion business. That's crazy. We've got to be willing to be called crazy at times because of our locked in fanatical focus on what's inside of our head and how it's just a matter of time before it manifests outwardly.
We often hear stories about people who have reached ultra success or maybe have gained an enormous amount of wealth. And some of the stories that we often hear are of how rigid they are, how it's so hard to work for them, how obsessed they'll scream on you in a minute. And all those things, and even to the borderline of there's some um, anxiety and maybe some mental challenges. Is it really that, or are they so in tune with their goal, their objective, their mission that all other things don't matter? I'm not subscribing to that. Yes, I am. Right. I am. Who is it that you need to be in order to accomplish your dreams, your goals, your objectives? As Marshall Goldsmith said in his book titled "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Who is it that you need to be to affect your subconscious? Let's take a step back a little bit. I want to read a comment from Wyman in the chat there, Galen. He says, our school system teaches, tests, and expects us to function and operate in the natural laws and in the natural rules. It does not teach or test or expect us to operate in faith. He goes on to say, we are a product of our formal education. If you teach faith the way that you taught math, science, and economics, we would walk in the faith that you and I are talking about here, Galen.
Oh man, I mean, you would expect nothing less from the wisdom broker, right? But think about that, right? Think about when the education system was created. It was created in the Industrial Revolution. It was created to produce more factory workers. It wanted you to be really, really adept at putting this piece of something from over here to over here, right? It wanted you to be able to calculate how many pieces of something you needed to have in order to complete this box, right? And that's fine, but those people who are mega successful, those people who we study and marvel at, typically they didn't do very well in school.
I didn't follow that
Typically,
model.
typically they left school before it was done, before the indoctrination was done, and now we're learning from them. So back to what you were saying earlier, who do we need to become in order to step into our own destiny? How much are we willing to really control our environment? We know, as you shared earlier, that negative thoughts and positive thoughts can't be in the same place at the same time. One has to dominate. Are you okay with people having negative thoughts around you? Are you okay with people saying negative things around you? When I was much younger, I used to have this thing where when I was around a group of people and they were talking about negative things and I can't and this can't be and we shouldn't be, I would say, "Oh, negativity, I gotta go. I can't hang out here. This is just way too negative." But as I've gotten older, I've been more accommodating of negativity. I've been more appeasing of negativity. I've been more excusing of people having negative thoughts, as opposed to that childlike persistence that I can't be around y'all if y'all gonna think like this. I can't hang out here.
I love it. I love it. I'm going back to the actors and actresses who wear those characters so well. Um, you're talking about it, the movie The Chosen. I watched a movie last night on Netflix called just totally the opposite, but it's called The Killer, right? And it was about an assassin. But even I'm thinking about that role he had to play. It was so on. He had to become, and actually I can't think of the actor's name. A great actor. I've seen him in so many different roles, and he plays his roles. He becomes that individual. What are some things, Galen? And we've called on them a little bit. What are some things that we need to put on, step into, in order to get in that frame of mind to accomplish our goals, our dreams, our objectives? Here's one of the first things that comes to mind for me, and then hopefully we can ping pong back and forth about some things that are so necessary for us to ensure that we have that focus for our goals. Our environment. What does your environment look like? Is your environment conducive to challenge Galen for that $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, that really important. I mean, you can't grow something positive in a negative environment. It's just not possible. You can't grow something positive from a negative environment. I'm going to suggest that the opposite is also true. You can't grow something negative from a positive environment.
Mm,
So it's our job to decide what kind of output, what kind of outcome are we looking for, and what's the environment that's going to allow that thing to grow. And I tell this story often about when I don't know, 5 or 6 years back, we were having this show, and Miss Ann was challenging me. She was saying, Galen, you keep saying all of these positive things about what you're going to do, but I sensed some conflict. I sensed some consternation. And I looked around at my environment, and although I had all of my plans for my future on my computer screen,
mm,
just behind my computer screen, I had all the plaques from my previous life. And so I was being torn between my future and my past. And it had nothing to do with my goals. It had everything to do with my environment.
yeah, yeah. Love that. Love that. You also made me think those who are not in a wealth centered environment, maybe those who are bordering poverty, pay attention to their environment. What's going on around their world? Who is in their ear? What are they listening to? Um, I had students who were telling me in class the other day, the economy's horrible right now. We can't do anything. our money's not doing it, then why are some people able to do things and you're not? So you see how we can get brainwashed to believing a certain way when someone else is in the same world that you're living in and they're seeing it and living a totally different way. What's that
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. While I was listening to you, I kept thinking, who benefits from us having an attitude of lack? Somebody benefits, right? Who benefits? Do we benefit from having a spirit of lack? Or is there someone else that's profiting from the standpoint that we believe that the economy is terrible and therefore we can't do anything? Therefore, we need to keep this job that we're not happy in. We need to keep this manufacturing mindset that everyone tells us that we need to have, that Wyman reminds us of. We need to keep that. Who benefits from that? And if you decide that you don't benefit, that you're not the one benefiting, then we need to change how we perceive our environment.
Yeah.
Because what's out there is not real. What's in here is real.
You made me go to in my head, who benefits from what we listen to on TV and the radio. And it's those radio and television stations that benefit. They're going to put out that news that is not always so positive. They're going to inject messages that will have you coming back to listening to them for more, so that they can so that they can get wealthy, and the commercials can come in there and pay for their salary, whatever the case may be. But you see, it's like a cycle.
Yeah.
I have to inject that type of messaging in order for you to keep coming back to listening to more of it, but then also affecting how you live on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to go back to a question that you posed a little while ago. You said, well, how do we get back to where we need to be? How do we get back on this track that we know works? What are the tools? What are the strategies? What are the tactics that we can use to make sure that we're the ones living the kind of life that we want to live? I've got some very tangible things that we can do.
Please.
Okay. Actually, in this book, number one, we need to gain clarity of our desire. We need to have faith.
Wait, you're cheating, man.
We need to leverage auto suggestion. We need to use our specialized knowledge, basically first understand our specialized knowledge, and then leverage our specialized knowledge. We need to leverage our imagination as the workshop to create something tangible out of our specialized knowledge. Then we need to create and leverage organized planning, make a decision that no matter what is going on around us, we're not going to deviate from the source of our faith. We need to have persistence, that when times get hard, not if they get hard, but when they get hard, that we're going to continue. We need to surround ourselves with like-minded people so that someone like a Dr. Peter James will remind me not to focus on the waves, but to stay focused on the source of my faith, the desire that I've told you that I have for what I'm trying to create. I've got to leverage this ability to transmute energy from one form to another. So the same energy that I might apply to one space of my life, how do I take that energy and transmute that and apply it to another part of my life? I've got to leverage my subconscious mind to stay connected with my source, because the subconscious mind is the link to access power that's beyond my physical and intellectual ability. I've got to use my brain, and all of this is around staying open to my sixth sense. And when there's a hunch, when there's a nudging, when I feel like someone and something is tapping me on the shoulder, acknowledge that, as opposed to staying focused on this physical reality that I'm living in. And then the other principle that we don't talk about a lot is how do I become aware of, stay aware of these ghosts of fear and how fear is a temptation to stray away from my purpose. And as I said earlier, fear and excitement, exactly the same thing. It's about how do I perceive what's on the other side of this activity. So yeah, maybe I am cheating, but all of us have the ability to cheat.
And so, for those of you who are listening, Galen just read through every single principle, or actually mentioned every single principle and chapter in Think and Grow Rich, in order how to affect both our faith, which will lead to affecting our subconscious for the better. But again, now, even from that perspective, Galen, what I'm hearing you say is, I got to put on this Think and Grow Rich and dive into it, layers in, so that I'm somewhat obsessed with it, so that I'm somewhat all in and have the tunnel vision. Whereas that the faith that is going to try to knock on me, and excuse me, the fear that's going to try to knock me down and get me off the tracks, that I can ignore that, I can eliminate that, so that I can focus in the right place, not only just for myself, but also for many of those around me, how I might be able to inspire them as a result of that as well. And I think, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, these are principles that many, many, many people reference these principles as being the key to their success.
Mhm.
And they've been doing that since 1937. And to quote my brother, it's not possible that these principles work for everyone except you,
Mm.
right? That doesn't make sense, that this is going to work for everyone since 1937 except you. So this seems to be how things work. These principles at work seem to be how people become ultra successful.
And Galen, you and I have read so many books, met so many people, that we can identify early on when they have been deep into Think and Grow Rich. Maybe they've written other books, or they've done other things, or their speeches, their presentations are very uniquely go full circle right back to this text, and they're just utilizing this text in order to get to their next level. Again, as you mentioned, if it could work for them, why can't it work for you and me?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Wyman goes on to say in the chat there, Galen, if you control the message an individual's brain receives, you can program and thus control their mind. As a man thinketh, so is he. If you teach him how to walk in faith, he'll be a man of faith. And then he also goes on to say, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. When negativity rules your thoughts and actions, he effectively steals, kills, and destroys our potential that can only manifest by faith.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I want to bring in the question that Donnelly has just posted.
Yeah.
Donnelly is here every single week. When he's not on the screen, he's definitely in the background, asking us those tough questions. He says, with the information presented, does it seem to indicate that we are standalone pillars of faith? If not, how can we merge our beliefs and our actions to use our faith to lift through those doubting Thomases around us? In fact, to be lifted ourselves. So, yeah, this is suggesting that we are supposed to be a physical representation of what we believe. Right? We're supposed to be a physical representation of what we believe. And if we don't stand on that, then not only are we not getting the results that we are supposed to be realizing here, but other people aren't getting the benefit. I really need you to be an amazing Peter James.
Yeah.
Because when you are an amazing Peter James, that encourages me to be just a little bit better Galen Bingham than I was yesterday. And that's the way this community thing works. That's why we have the principle of the power of the mastermind.
Yeah. I got to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Galen, about our environment as well. and it has me thinking about two specific scenarios. We definitely know that individuals who step into the life of crime, Napoleon Hill says this in the book, they don't start out that way. They are surrounded by others who have done so. They don't just wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm going to become a thief." They've been exposed to it in some form or fashion, and maybe not just one time, but multiple times, right? And then it becomes a thing. Have you ever watched or read a book about someone who's been kidnapped or held hostage or something like that, and they've been there for a long enough time, and over time they become sympathetic to their kidnappers, especially if they're just being held, they become somewhat understanding. Why is that? Is because when you're digesting that rhetoric day in and day out, it becomes, for lack of a better word, indoctrinated. And then you begin to think differently, see things differently. In both of those scenarios, what if we could swing the pendulum to the exact opposite and identify how we can become the all-encompassing faith, affecting our all-encompassing way to affect our subconscious, so that we are all in on positivity, on our goals, on that $1 million, on that relationship, on buying that home. You know, whatever it is that your goal is, how can you begin to digest it? As I mentioned earlier, put on that character and begin to move forward, just as such.
Absolutely. You know, a movie, an old school movie that I think about quite often when I hear people talk about these kinds of principles, is the movie New Jack City. And I don't even know when it came out, but every time I watch New Jack City, I'm always taken by the fact that Nino Brown was running a corporation. He was, I mean, there were very few differences between he and Henry Ford, right? I mean, he had an assembly line, he had marketers, he had branding, the exact same, except that one was deemed to be against the law and one was deemed to be lawful, right? And so we read books about Henry Ford and we laugh at the notion of a Nino Brown. But it's the exact same principles. It's just based upon what was the environment that each of them came up in. So we talk about the importance of the environment because it's all in the goulash. It's all in the goulash. It all reinforces who you are and who you are trying and destined to become. And then there's, Peter, I'd love for you to talk about, because there's a place that we go annually to get a kind of inoculation, a booster shot as to who we're trying to be and how do we stay focused on not the physical reality of what's here, but the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, and that environment of who we're trying to become.
Thanks for that reminder again. I got lost in the conversation a little bit. I was all in on how we can affect our subconscious. And I just forgot that what we have coming up is an annual meeting, our annual accountability meeting, which allows me to reflect on where I've come from this past year or even past years, but then also where I am going. And I say where I am going because it's not like a wish or a dream, because even as we're talking about today, I am stepping on into my goals. I am all in. I am not letting the outside world affect this path to my goals. And so now, who can hold me accountable? Who can I surround myself with who is on a like-minded trajectory? And what you're looking at on the screen is the group of individuals who are holding me accountable. And we meet every single year in January in South Florida. This year, this happens to be in Pompano Beach, on the beach, to talk about your goals, talk about in all areas of your life and not just financial. So if you've never been able to step on into a goal setting, accountability type of retreat, this is your opportunity on January 5th and 6th, 2024, coming up very, very soon. As a matter of fact, this is your time of year to begin thinking about what's next, where you've come from and what's next. And if you don't have something solid you're able to put down on paper or others to hold you accountable, we got that for you as well. Good stuff, Galen.
Yeah, man, I tell you that the time is going by so fast, man. We've only got a few more minutes. I'm curious, Dr. Peter, what are some things, not necessarily to close just yet, but what are some things that continue to jump out at you every time you read this principle about the subconscious? Because, like I said, I'm always amazed at how we can continue to read this book over and over and over again, and it takes on new life every time. So, what are some new things that captured your imagination this time?
I got to go back to that prayer, how we started off a little bit. And I'm going to read from the text. It says, and because it is a fact that most people who pray do so only after everything else has failed. They go to prayer with their minds filled with fear and doubt, which are the emotions that the subconscious mind acts upon and passes on to the infinite intelligence, right? So now, going back to your story, Peter walking on the water, and this fear component, or even asking, praying, what do I need to change about who I am, how I'm thinking, how I need to affect my subconscious better day in and day out, and how to eliminate the negative thoughts and impulses that swirl around us like sharks. That's what I'm on right now. And I have been on for a few months now. And that's where I want to stay, in that space where I'm stepping into autosuggestion, meditating more, and really trying my best to eliminate those influences that can affect my subconscious negatively, even when I don't know it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm trying to step into, Galen. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you. I mean, you brought this up and reminded me of the power of your environment,
Yeah.
and how it doesn't happen overnight. It's just one small thing after another small thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's right now I need to clean my office. I've been traveling quite a bit, and before I left on my last trip, I pulled out some books and was thumbing through the book that I want to take with me, and I left the other books kind of sitting there. And then I wanted to get some papers, because I thought I might do some writing. So I wanted to get some papers. So I kind of pulled out some other papers out of these file folders, and I kind of left the file folders sitting there on the table as I was going through them. And I had to get all of my cords because I was taking my computer. So I pulled my cords and kind of had to move some furniture back to unplug the cords. And these were all small acts, but now my office is a mess, right? I never sat down and said, let me mess up my office because I want to have a messy office. It was just one small thing after another small thing. And now my environment is not conducive to where I need to go, where I'm intending to go. And so I'm going to be really, really mindful of, how do I maintain the environment that's going to be conducive to these dreams that I'm putting on my computer that I'm trying to realize? Because as we learned before, you can't walk on the water if you're focused on the waves. You can't walk on the water if you're focused on the waves. And we need to have all our focus on this reality that we're trying to create, the source of the success that we're trying to create.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching and listening, where are the negative impulses coming from? Where are the negative thoughts coming from? Those thoughts and impulses that prevent you from thinking that you can, or you will, Where are they coming from? How do you begin to eliminate them? What's the environment like? What environment do you need to be in beginning today? Who do you need to begin to limit conversations with? What do you need to stop listening to? Mm-hmm. Right? Or watching? And now getting ready to go into 2024, what needs to change? Go ahead, Galen.
No, I was just going to say, and a lot of times we're not even listening to it.
Yeah. It's just playing.
It's just playing in the background, right? We're not even watching it. It's just playing in the background, right? But our subconscious is never idle. Our subconscious is always working. It's always processing all kinds of information around us, whether we're focused on it or not. So that's what I found interesting about what you were saying. We're not even listening to this stuff.
Yeah. Good stuff. Galen, tell us how we can stay in touch with you as we move forward.
So many ways to stay in touch. I am on Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I'm probably the most active on Instagram. But the most fun way to stay in touch with me is through my podcast, Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. We talk to leaders all over the world. We talk about the whiskeys they drink, the music they listen to, and what they believe it takes to really be an effective leader. I double dog dare you to try us on any podcast platform. Just type in Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership, and you'll find conversations with all kinds of leaders. Or you can type in my name on any podcast platform, and you'll find the podcast. I also want to challenge everyone to go to hotsheetapp.com. If you go to hotsheetapp.com, you will get access to a tool that has been created over the past 5 years from my working with clients trying to accomplish major goals. It's a tool that allows you to understand, articulate your major goal, break it down into steps, and then hold yourself accountable. If you go there right now and download the app, I'll give you 30 days free access to see how far we can get with helping you accomplish your goals.
Good stuff, Galen. We did it. We were handed the keys today. We drove away really good, and we had a great conversation going on. Ann McNeil would be so proud of us, sure. Hey, folks, my name is Dr. Peter A. James, the high performance coach. You can find me on any social media platform, specifically LinkedIn, Instagram, and a little bit of YouTube at Dr. Peter A. James. That's at DrPeterAjames, or at shiftyourmindset.com. Excited for you to be here this week, and we are here every week, same time, same channel, as always. Thank you so much. Take care and make it a great one.